Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor and Blake Cripps. This is Keeper of the Games.
Some may say that we are wildly unqualified. Some may say we are only mildly entertaining. I say we are exactly where we are supposed to be, persevering through severe thunderstorms and boiling water to bring you the latest and greatest in Wichita sports on episode 98 of the Keeper of the Games podcast. I am your host, Blake Cripps, joined once again by Timothy Castor. We are live at KOGpod.com, Facebook.com/Keeper of the Games, at KOGpod on Twitter, KOGpod.podomatic.com, the videos on YouTube. The audio is pretty much anywhere. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google, Apple, and so much more. We've got plenty to talk about, but we will go first to Tommy. Tommy, how are you doing today, sir?
I mean, I was doing well. I don't know if you realized it. You called me Timothy.
I did
in the Open. I don't know why you chose to do that, but
I mean, that's the long version. Is that the long version of Tommy?
No, it's not.
But Tommy's the long version of
no.
Tom.
No, Thomas.
Thomas.
Maybe? Yeah. Timothy
that probably would have been better.
Would be long for Tim, and or Timmy. But you know what? It is what it is. I'm doing well. The perseverance phrase that you used is absolutely correct. My wife is out of town this weekend, and she didn't take our kid with her. So I am on dad duty solo for the entire weekend coming up. So
I mean, so you're basically an apostle, just like Timothy and Thomas. So there you go. It all ties together.
Fair enough.
How's that bonding time been working for you?
It's good. Changed a lot of poopy diapers. And basically that's what happens when, you don't have your better half at home, but we're having a fun time. And I just figured that it's easier for him to not wear pants because I'm taking his pants off all the time to change his diapers. So
sure,
might as well just not
be real excited to get this update.
Might as well just not wear pants. That's the easiest thing to do.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
We do want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe the show, whether you're tuning in for Tommy, Timothy, Blakerish, or Blake. We'd love to have you like, share, and subscribe with all of your friends on whatever platform that you're watching or listening on. We really appreciate it. We're going to get into some baseball today with the Royals and the Wind Surge. One team stinks, the other one doesn't. And a look at the upcoming defending national champions. There has been some college basketball news we need to get to, but we're going to start with a Wichita State whip-around and go through a couple of news and notes that I think we should get to for Wichita State. We'll start with men's basketball. Obviously, the team is starting some of their summer programs, their off-season conditioning, and a lot's been made of Craig Porter being the only player to come with 2 years of experience returning to this Wichita State team. It's going to be a big-time challenge for Isaac Brown to reforge and rebuild this team. And for a lot of Wichita State fans who have already made their decision, I feel like this is going to be a referendum on Isaac Brown this year, and maybe for a new athletic director, we'll get to that in just a second, on what IB's future is going to be with this program and, maybe his career as a college basketball coach, which I think is slightly unfair to boil everything down to just one season. But obviously there are going to be big-time expectations for maybe not a return to where the Shockers were even just a season ago before this last year, which was a disappointment, and certainly not to the era of Greg Marshall when he had things rolling. But I think that there definitely is going to be a little pressure to see some steps and see some movement in the correct direction. And obviously Craig Porter, not a huge part of last year's team for Wichita State in terms of scoring and production, did play a lot of minutes, but he's going to be the guy that is going to have to be at least the leader on paper and the leader emotionally for this team, at least at the beginning. They've got a lot of guys who can come in, and certainly when you bring in the type of talent that Coach Brown believes that he has brought in, hopefully you're going to have some players that can really step up and play and be studs, because Shockers have got to replace a lot with Etienne no longer in the fold, Dexter Dennis, Morris Udeze all leaving via the portal. There's going to be a lot to replace. And so what are your thoughts on where Shocker basketball finds itself here as we approach the July 4th holiday next month, looking to try to get rebounded and get reset for the 2022-2023 campaign?
Well, I think that when you look at all the players that transferred out of Wichita State right before Greg Marshall left the program under that cloud of controversy, I feel like that was a little bit of a different situation. That sort of shined the light on what was happening within the culture of the program. Whereas I feel like this current crop of Shockers transferring out, and I don't have any kind of inside information, but it just feels different. It feels like this is just the state of college basketball now, where players are going to utilize that transfer portal, and you're almost more shocked if a player decides to stick around than the other options. So, I don't feel as though this is a bunch of players that have made up their minds on the viability of Isaac Brown leading this program long term. But I do think that a lot of players nowadays, with the NIL opportunities that are plentiful, and with what other high-level programs can utilize to attract players to their program, a lot of players have the grass is greener on the other side mentality, and maybe it is, depending on the situation, and maybe it's not. It's not a one-size-fits-all category, but I think
Isn't
it is
interesting, Tommy, how the guys, both coaches and players, put so much into that initial recruiting window and picking the right school, only to leave like 5 or 6 months later. That's astounding to me.
It is, and I think that, part of the reason that we're talking about this as it relates to Wichita State, which I know we'll be getting into a little bit later on in the program, is the fact that Wichita State has kind of lagged behind in the NIL world. And so you look at some of these players that have transferred out, and regardless if it's been made public or not, you would, I think, venture to guess that a lot of these players, especially the more high-profile ones, your Dexter Dennis's, your Morris Udeze, some of these other guys, are getting more of an NIL situation than what they were getting at Wichita State. I think that plays into it. Does Isaac Brown shoulder some of the blame for that? I think maybe to a little bit of an extent. We talked at length when Darren Boatwright lost his job about just how the university as a whole was lagging behind in the NIL world. And so I do think that trickles down to the head basketball coach, but ultimately his job is to not secure NIL deals. His job is to coach the basketball team. Although
he's not even allowed technically to do NIL, is he?
Right.
Like how much, so if we try to parlay this, because I think everybody's had their opinion on NIL and all the coaches have made their opinion, how much do we think that made their opinion known, I should say, to finish that thought? How much do we think, like, is Bill Self and is he in the room when they're making these deals at Kansas? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe we ought to get Matt Beatty back on the show at some point, since he's actually, involved in the day-to-day transactions of this kind of business. But I feel like even do we think that John Calipari is inking these deals at Kentucky, or Nick Saban's doing this at Alabama? Dabo Swinney is yelling it from the mountaintops that Clemson's not doing this, and they're not doing the transfer portal, and that's not for them, and all this. So, how much do we think that the head coach obviously has always, and will always be one of the primary considerations for why players come into or depart a program. The quality of that relationship, the quality of that coaching that you're getting in that relationship that you build with that coach. Are players attaching a dollar sign to that relationship now? I'm not sure how much. I don't know if I buy that Bill Self or these other coaches, while being cognizant of it, I don't know if they're, how much they're selling, and maybe I just don't know how much is going into this NIL deal for these kids now. It's
but this is not the first time that players are, that they tend to attach dollar signs to a program or a coach. Look at what you mentioned, John Calipari. Look at what he hangs his hat on. It's not about come to Kentucky and be a 4-year guy and we're going to win championships. It's we're going to get you to the NBA. That is what he hangs his hat on. So yeah, you've got recruits that they're attaching dollar signs, maybe, a little bit delayed dollar signs, but dollar signs after the fact because of John Calipari and Kentucky. So this sort of thing has been prevalent for a long time. Hell, you look at the Adidas deals and the Nike deals, and it's a lot less back room now. But it's not a lot different than what it was. It's just now people can be more open and vocal about it, and players can actually sort of take things into their own hands to try to better themselves in the immediate with really no consequences whatsoever. So, but going back to the Wichita State situation and Isaac Brown, I do think, and we talked about this again when Darren Boatwright was removed from his post, a few weeks ago, that not only for Isaac Brown, but also for Eric Wedge, the next season is going to be crucial for both of them because they're going to have a new athletic director that did not hire them coming in. And, especially to maintain competitiveness, not just on the field or on the court, but also competitiveness when it comes to TV deals, competitiveness when it comes to conference realignment, competitiveness when it comes to the NIL. It's going to be so essential for guys like Isaac Brown and Eric Wedge to show that progress on the field and to turn things around. And so I would venture to guess that this transfer season and the recruiting process and all of that this year is probably the most important that it has been during the Isaac Brown era at Wichita State.
Moving on to Wichita State softball, a couple of big-time awards came in for a couple of players on that team. Sydney McKinney, second-team All-American. She's the first two-time All-American in Wichita State softball history. Addison Barnard, a first-team All-American. And I tweeted out pretty demonstrably, and no regrets about this opinion, don't think these are going to be the last of All-American awards that these two young ladies win in terms of NIL deals. You would think and you would hope that based on the sellout crowds that they got over there, that these two young ladies and probably Lauren Lucas and maybe some other players as well are going to be eating some queso, if you know what I mean, here in the next couple of months or so.
I know I'm kind of cutting you off here, but the other thing to point out when it relates to NIL is that I think people have it in their minds that this is just, 6-figure deals with car dealerships and things like that. One of the biggest things that we've talked about in the past that the NIL opens up and allows for are players like Sydney McKinney to host clinics and camps. And I saw on Twitter that I don't know if it's already happened or if it's coming up here in the next couple of weeks, but she's been promoting pretty heavily that she's got a softball clinic coming up and to sign your kids up and that sort of thing. And that's an opportunity that wasn't allowed. It wasn't something that players could do for money to make extra cash on the side.
The girls in Wichita who are like in the 5th through 10th grade,
huge.
Like you can go and get coached. And what are the chances that probably Addison Barnard signs up to shows up to sign some shirts one of those days in camp? I'd say probably pretty high that happens. So the opportunity for those youngsters to go out and get coached by, Sydney McKinney, it's like, are you kidding me?
It's not just major endorsement deals and commercials and things like that. It's the ability for, these players to use their skills to coach a younger generation and to get a little bit of cash for it. And so, I would like to think, if I was a softball parent in Wichita or in the area, absolutely I would sign my kid to go up and learn from a second-team All-American in Sydney McKinney. That's an incredible opportunity, and the fact that she's right here in Wichita makes it even better.
And it's just a very easy way that, because, we've seen when you go out to those games, when it is sold out, even when it's not, there's a lot of young girls that are there watching. They're watching those players and looking and seeing, okay, this could be me in the future, which, by the way, unbelievable free, although, it's not necessarily free. Christy Breadbenner is probably going to give her access to the facility, I'm guessing, but like free recruiting for Wichita State softball. So Coach Bredbetter's like, yeah, have the field for a week. Can you get a second week done? Sure. Let's have, where's the Addison Barnard home run clinic? Let's just have girls out and have a home run derby for charity or something. But yeah, free recruiting for Wichita State softball. So it really is a win-win for all the parties all around on that. One other major story we have to get to, nothing yet on a new Wichita State athletic director. We've heard the musings about the list and some possible candidates. And I know that I think it was Taylor Eldridge reported that, of 5 candidates. And I don't know if those are ones that he's confirmed or just ones that he is inferring. But, there are names that have been tossed around. You've tossed out one. I've tossed out a couple as well. I'm a little surprised that this is a position that is still open and that it hasn't been hired yet. I do realize that, I guess we are in the off season and Wichita State does not have football. So maybe there's not that just real pressing need. Like it felt like when KU needed a new athletic director, they moved pretty fast because, spring football was coming up. There is a need at KU, obviously, to reinvigorate at that time the football program. And it feels like you need an AD on site to do that. Maybe at a school like Wichita State without football, maybe it's not as pressing. But I feel like, for Wichita State, you got to be looking at getting people back on board with basketball, getting people back on board with baseball. And there's still, there is not any time off in this business. There really isn't. So I'm a little surprised that we don't have a name yet and there hasn't been an announcement. How surprised are you, and what do you think this timeline is going to look like?
I'm a little surprised, but I know that Sarah Adams, has been obviously tapped as the interim athletic director for Wichita State. And so it's not like there isn't anybody captaining the ship, right now. So that's good. But I do anticipate that we'll see someone, I would imagine, maybe around the 4th of July would be just a wild guess. Because then at that point, if that doesn't happen, you're looking at 2 months from the time that Boatwright was let go to then. So you'd like to have somebody in place by that point. But yeah, I am a little surprised that it's not been, that there hasn't been a list of, here are the candidates. Here are the people that we are going to interview. We know that President Muma has enlisted a search committee of prominent shockers, several of whom were former athletes and prominent athletes. I know Evan Wessel from basketball is on that search committee alongside several others. I think Nate Robertson maybe is on that committee too. So there are several prominent former shockers that are in that committee. And maybe they're just keeping it very close to the chest. I'm with you. I read that article from Taylor Eldridge, and outside of the 5 people that he posted, it's not like I'm necessarily hearing rumblings about anybody else. Really, I haven't heard rumblings about anybody, but just those 5 people in the article. I guess one of the big questions for me is, does Wichita State, is it a prerequisite that whoever they bring in has some kind of tie to Wichita State? Worked at Wichita State at one point as an alum, has some kind of connection, because 3 out of the 5 do. 3 out of the 5 that Taylor Eldridge wrote about do. The other 2 don't. And what I find interesting about the final 2, they both have ties to KU. Mike Harity, who is, I think, the deputy athletic director for Army, was one of the candidates for athletic director at KU when Travis Goff got the job. And then Sean Lester is a name that it's always been interesting to me. And I don't know Sean personally. I've been around him a handful of times. That's an interesting name to me because he's one of the associate ADs at KU. He has been with the Jayhawks for nearly 20 years and has been interim athletic director a couple of different times at KU. And he has not done the whole grass is greener on the other side situation. He has stayed at KU through multiple athletic director tenures, including
kind of unusual.
including, let's not forget the disastrous tenure of Jeff Long. He was there as one of his lieutenants during that time and has stuck around.
He was there in the Lou Perkins era too, which Lou Perkins' departure was not necessarily, on the best of terms.
Right.
Shane
And I believe
Zenger wasn't exactly ushered out on a red carpet either.
And I don't know, I don't think he was named interim athletic director. He wasn't after Jeff Long, because that was a booster that was named interim.
Yes, it was a booster. He was named interim in September of 2010, and he was
after Lou Perkins, right? That would have been when Lou Perkins left.
That would have been when Shane Zenger was hired.
And then after Shane Zenger, correct.
And then he was the interim May through August in 2018. So again, going back to this, athletic director search, maybe this is not all that uncommon because we just look at these two from Kansas.
Sure.
I mean, September to February, that's almost half a year. No athletic director. May to August, that's a pretty quick turnaround. So maybe I have it in my mind that I thought that they were going to move faster, but maybe it's perfectly normal and acceptable to not move faster. Although I would say, and I think you would, probably agree with me, I don't know if KU exactly knocked it out of the park with either one of those hires. Shane Zenger definitely did a lot for Kansas, but did not accomplish his primary goal. And Jeff Long, we know what kind of a abject train wreck that was. But so I don't know if necessarily waiting like KU did is what Wichita State should do if they think they've got their right guy or gal. Go ahead and move in. But that is an interesting name. The one name that I keep going back to is one guy who has ties, I believe, to Wichita State, but also has ties to Kansas State University. That's Scott Garrett at Cleveland State, who your friend and mine, Ryan Beatty, Matt Beatty, he has been extremely open. And, Matt Beatty obviously was raised a lot of money for Wichita State when he was in the athletic department there as one of the guys in charge of finding those major gifts, and then spent about a decade doing that up at KU. So if anybody knows this business and cares about Shocker athletics, it's going to be Matt Beatty. But Scott Garrett is a guy that he has shouted from the rooftops is who Wichita State would hire. Was he in that list of 5?
He was. In fact, I'm pretty sure he was number 1 on that list. And I want to clarify with both Mike Harity and Sean Lester, I'm not advocating for either one of them. They were 4th and 5th on Taylor Eldridge's list. I just thought,
did he have them listed in terms of, or was it in no particular order?
I don't know. I mean, the first 3 all had ties
I want to know
Wichita
the
State.
Taylor Eldridge power ranking for future Wichita State ADs.
Maybe we get Taylor Eldridge on the program because I can't answer for him.
We probably should.
I do know the first 3 all had ties to Wichita State, and then Harity did not, and Sean Lester did not. I just thought it was interesting, especially if Wichita State chooses to go in a direction outside of the Shocker family. Now, for those who are listening to this podcast and not watching it, when I posed the question, does Wichita State have to stay within their family, you adamantly shook your head no.
No.
But I know that you mentioned Scott Garrett, so if he does have ties to Wichita State,
I'm okay with it. To me, it's not a disqualifying factor.
Sure.
But it's not something that has to happen, for me at least. And, I think that sometimes you can get into this trap of, we've got to be inside the family. We have to have a Michigan man for this hire because that's our tradition and that's our culture. And that's what, going back to Michigan, and they always only hire Michigan men for their jobs. That's not necessarily the way that you have to go. I think sometimes it's good to get an outside perspective. There had been a lot of success under the previous regime. There were a lot of problems at the end of that previous regime. And so maybe it is time for a clean break and a totally fresh set of eyes on the program. If you are asking me who my favorite candidate is, it would be a guy who has spent time in Kansas, at Kansas State and Wichita State. Scott Garrett would be my guy if I had to pick today who should be the next guy at Wichita State. I would go with Scott Garrett for all the reasons that Matt Beatty has said and more. He's a fundraiser. He's got experience in Power 5 conferences, and he's got experience, trying to build up an athletic department like he has done at Cleveland State. So to me, when I say no, I emphatically reject the notion that you must be a Wichita State guy to get this job or lady. But to me, it is certainly not a disqualifying factor to be a candidate for the job.
The other thing that I'll say about Scott Garrett is that he has experience in the top job. So we're not talking about bringing on someone who was a top assistant or
an
an
interim
associate or an interim.
Sure.
He is the athletic director currently at Cleveland State. Yes, Cleveland State is a smaller university than Wichita State is, but he has been an athletic director. And I think that having that experience as an established AD, that does help. It's not regardless if I've got a ton of respect for a guy like Sean Lester, who has spent 20 years at KU as the associate, a couple times interim athletic director. That's awesome. And there are a lot of people like him, but you get promoted to be the permanent top dog. There's going to be a learning curve, even if you've spent 20 years with that university, even as an associate. There are different things you're going to have to learn as the top guy. Scott Garrett is currently the top guy, so I think that learning curve is going to be a little less steep.
Also very interesting that Cleveland State does not have a football program, so he kind of knows what that's like as well. Bonus points for you. Can you name Cleveland State's mascot and conference?
Is Cleveland State in the Ohio Valley Conference?
No.
Well, I mean,
totally wrong. Yeah. Do we have a sound effect for that? Probably not.
I don't know.
No. Air horn.
That was a complete guess. And then their mascot, are they the Bobcats?
No.
I don't
not
know.
Even close. The Vikings Horizon League. Horizon
okay.
League would be the correct answer.
Fair enough.
Purdue, Fort Wayne, Youngstown State, Detroit Mercy, Robert Morris, Milwaukee, Green Bay, some of the other schools in that conference, just to give you an idea of the context there.
It's a premier conference there.
One of my last questions for you, what do you think should be the top priority for the new athletic director at Wichita State University?
I think there are two. Number one, and I referenced it a little while ago, is getting Wichita State caught up in the NIL field and being progressive with that. Darren Boatwright, I think admittedly was a little bit reactive and a little bit dismissive and a little bit back on his heels about it. And I don't necessarily disagree with his reasoning at the time. It was, look, like we were told
what they said.
It's what they said. We're just doing what they said. But, fortune favors the bold is the old saying, and Wichita State was not bold when it came to NIL. And so the fact that there's already been an NIL collective that has formed since Darren Boatwright left, I think is a good first step. But not only having an athletic director who can come in and can say, look, like this is what we're going to do with NIL, but it's also to be on the forefront of what the rest of the country is doing with NIL and what the governing bodies are thinking about NIL and being a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to NIL, because you get caught with your pants down, it takes a while to catch back up again. And so I think that's incredibly important. One thing that I think we're going to start to see more and more of, and Duke was, as far as I know, the first school to do it. I don't know if you saw this, hired a general manager for their basketball program. And she was a former Nike executive. And she's now the quote unquote general manager for Duke men's basketball. And so and that person is sort of the liaison when it comes to NIL deals between the sponsors and the program, so the head coach doesn't have to worry about it. And so I think that we're going to start to see more and more of that. I would love to see Wichita State be on the forefront of that. Isaac Brown say, look, like I need to get some budget money and hire a general manager for my program and have this person help me bring in these players and have deals ready for them. And whatever that process looks like, I think that's going to be important. Clearly, it doesn't matter what teams did in the past. And I'm referencing the KU Adidas deal, because if Duke is going to hire a Nike executive to help Duke players get money, clearly none of that stuff matters anymore. So that's a different story.
Unless you're
altogether,
Wichita State baseball, in which case, if you got some extra hunting equipment, they're going to take, like 70 wins from you. But,
right. Yeah.
But
whatever.
Penn State doesn't get any wins lost.
Yeah.
Not,
so I think
that I'm still caught up on that or anything.
I think the NIL is number one. I think number two is having an athletic director that is able to galvanize and unite Wichita State fans. I'm somebody that has lived here my entire life. I'm a Wichitan through and through. And I say this.
Even though you're living in Andover.
Well, whatever. I have a Wichita flag license plate. I'm a half
Fair
a mile
enough.
away from the county line. I feel like this is going to sound like an insult to Shocker fans, and I don't mean it as an insult. I just mean it as what I've observed over my 36 years in Wichita is that the Shocker fan base overall is pretty fickle, and they're demanding for good reason. They want to see success, right? But if there isn't a certain level of success that they feel like they need to have, then the fans, in a lot of cases, just kind of stop showing up. I remember the Roundhouse in the mid-90s. It was empty. Shocker baseball over the last few years, the diehard dedicated fans that filled up X Stadium, they're not really around anymore.
There
Same
are still
thing with
those old guys. When I fill in on PA over there are still those guys that have got like those old starter button-up Shockers jackets that Gene Stevenson used to wear, and you're like, man, I wonder how many games that jacket has been to.
They're wearing the yellow and black headset radio.
Oh yeah,
listening to Mike
Absolutely.
Kennedy.
They've still got the Shocker, the old Woo Shock with the baseball logo that they don't use anymore.
Yep.
There are still those guys, but I mean,
they're
you
all
look at the
keeping
stands,
score. They've got their score pads and they're keeping score in there.
They're still there.
Right.
But you are correct. You look around. When's the last time they had 8,000 there?
Yeah.
I don't know
It's been
the
a
answer
long
to that.
time.
It's been a while.
And that was commonplace for a long time, in this city to see that.
Sure.
And we're starting to see that with basketball again, and we're not that far removed from Shocker dominance in basketball. And
an AAC championship 2 seasons ago.
And there were games last year where it was a struggle to get fans to show up to Coke Arena to watch the basketball team. So I think some of that, I don't want this to just overall be a knock on the failures of Darren Boatwright. However, one thing that Darren Boatwright was not was charming and gregarious and out in the public. And, I will say you have to temper that a little bit because Jeff Long was all of those things at KU and he was a train wreck. However, I think it is important that you have an athletic director who is front and center, an athletic director who is verbal, an athletic director who is willing to step out of his comfort zone a little bit. I don't think Darren Boatwright really did that. Eric Sexton did. Eric Sexton was a guy that would go out and fundraise and shake hands and kiss babies. And
Absolutely.
he was doing ribbon cuttings and handing out basketballs, and he was doing all of that stuff. That's what the new athletic director needs to be for Wichita State, to try to galvanize this fan base again and get butts in the seats.
I don't have as much of a philosophical argument as you. I have more of a logistical argument and a practical argument. I think that the new AD needs to form a statewide Shocker sports radio network. I don't understand why Wichita State doesn't have one. And I said it in 2013 when I had a show. I said they need a statewide network today, tomorrow, the next day, next week, next year, whenever. They need to do this because Wichita State just got off a Final Four. You've got all kinds of Kansas people that are wanting to cheer and watch and find and follow this program. You've got a great play-by-play announcer in Mike Kennedy. You need to make this happen, because you've got, a Scott City guy on the roster. You can get an affiliate in Scott City, Kansas. You can probably get one in Goodland, in Dodge City, in Hutchinson. The time is now to do this. And I think that opens up more opportunities to spread the brand of the program. And there's other metropolitan universities that have radio networks. I think Wichita State needs to join them shortly. Do as much as you can. Don't worry about, we can't do all the games, or we can't. I mean, obviously for men's basketball, you're going to have all the games. I think that they can do that. But, I wouldn't worry about, we can't be as big as this Power 5 program or this or Gonzaga. Worry about being as big as you can possibly be right now. Maybe you can't get all of the women's basketball games on a statewide network. I get that. get as many as you can. Do what you are able to do. Do what you're able to do to get volleyball back on the radio. Do what you're able to do to get softball on the radio. Time has never been better to try to expand the coverage of Shockers softball. So that would be my priority, and my challenge for the new AD is get a statewide Shocker sports radio network going. Mike Kennedy, I think would be all in on doing that. And I think that you're just behind if you don't have some sort of statewide radio presence, especially in a state where you're competing against two other Division I schools that do have it and probably have some affiliates outside of the state of Kansas.
I would take it. I'd take it a step further and say that
Sure.
Really, I think where Wichita State falls short is any sort of outreach in general outside of the metro. It's pretty clear around the state who is KU and who is K-State, right? Like you get out to Western Kansas and farmland and all that, it's pretty dominant
Kansas
K-State.
State fans.
You get more in the Northeast side, it's KU. Generally speaking, you really don't, even in Wichita, it's like who's KU, who's K-State. There's not a whole lot of outreach for the university and the brand in general outside of the metro right here. And I think that's something that a sports network would certainly help with. But I think that there are some other initiatives that, that need to be in place too.
One last thing about Wichita State, all three of the programs in the state of Kansas, Wichita State being one of them, the University of Kansas, Kansas State, they've all three got athletes that are competing this weekend at the National Track and Field NCAA Championships, the outdoor championships in Oregon. So good luck to the Shockers, Jayhawks, and Wildcats in that endeavor. And this just broke today that a longtime associate head coach of the volleyball program, Sean Carter, has departed. He is taking Chelsea Scott with him. She's going to be his lead assistant. He is joining the Bengals, going to be the head coach at Idaho State University. He has been a big part of some really, really, really good Shocker volleyball programs. Katie Riley, Abby Lehman, Tabitha Brown, 2 MVC tournament titles, a regular season American Athletic Conference title. They went to 3 NCAA tournaments with him, 1 National Invitational Volleyball Championship appearance, a Missouri Valley Conference regular season title. He was instrumental in Coach Lamb, and not that Coach Lamb isn't going to find great assistants, and I think that Katie Riley is actually now back with the program now with her married name, Katie Zimmerman. So she's a great get, was a huge middle blocker, big part of the success that they had there in that stretch when they really had it rolling at the end of the Missouri Valley era and going in when they took the American by storm. So I know Coach Lamb's going to get things turned around here. I believe that he will here in the next few years. But those are 2 big departures from the volleyball program as well. That's all I got, Tommy. Anything else that we have missed for the Shockers that we need to get to?
Yeah, I have one more quick note for Wichita State. I don't know if you saw this or not. Within the last 24 hours, Jace Kaminska has entered the transfer portal. He will be leaving Shocker baseball.
I did not see that. That's not great. He was a guy who would I think could have helped Wichita State baseball
He had a little bit of a sophomore slump. I believe he was like maybe 3-9. His ERA was up over 5, I believe. Now, obviously, he had a great freshman year, without a doubt. I think he had some conference honors his freshman year and that sort of thing. Newcomer of the year, but a little bit of a letdown last year. But he has entered the transfer portal. He will not be playing for Eric Wedge's squad next year.
Let's go to baseball, where the Royals are currently leading the Baltimore Orioles 4-2 in the top of the 5th in this game as it is being played on Thursday, June 9th. And if you look at the MLB standings as of today, your Kansas City Royals are, in fact, the worst professional baseball team in the major leagues, with a record of 18-37, 10-19 at home, 8-18 away. They have a winning percentage of .327. There are guys in the major leagues who are hitting better than Kansas City's winning percentage. That is how bad KC is. Tommy, we're going to get to the Wind Surge in a little bit. They are playing much, much better baseball and get you the latest on them. Do you have any thoughts on the Royals right now? They're just so bad, so unredeemable. And just as I say that, the Orioles have tied the ball game at 4 in the top of the 5th. This season it is not even Independence Day, and for all intents and purposes, this season is over for Kansas City.
I've got a couple things to say. First off, and this isn't about the team, but it pisses me off royally that we live in Wichita and I cannot access a Royals baseball game on MLB.TV due to blackout restrictions. And I live 3 hours away from Kansas City.
Bally Sportsnet.
I know I have Bally. I have it on cable, but if I'm not on one of my cable TVs and I've got my Fire Stick in and I've got MLB TV pulled up, I cannot watch. Like right now, I'm in my office. I don't have my cable in my office, but I have a Fire TV and I can't watch the Royals and the Orioles because it's blacked out in Wichita, in 3 hours away from Kansas City. Royally makes me mad. That's neither here nor there. The team. Look, the thing that I think is most frustrating to me is that Dayton Moore has done a lot for the organization over the last 15 plus years. Don't get me wrong. He absolutely has. John Sherman is a new owner in Major League Baseball. His story has yet to be told as an owner. The problem is both of these guys, as it stands right now, are absolutely complacent. They're absolutely complacent with whatever crap this is that the Royals are putting out night in and night out. There's got to be a change. There's got to be changes made. And you look around baseball and teams have started pulling the plugs on their managers. That those teams are doing significantly better than Mike Matheny is in Kansas City. Joe Madden lost his job with the Angels. The Angels lost 12 games straight before they fired him. The Phillies fired Joe Girardi. The Phillies were only a couple games under 500 when they fired Joe Girardi.
Yeah, I didn't get that one, honestly.
The fact that the Royals, really all they've done is offered up this sacrificial lamb named hitting coach Terry Bradshaw and said he's the guy that we're going to let go and he's going to be the sacrifice we make because we're not going to make any other sweeping changes, no wholesale changes. We're just going to be complacent with what we have, and what they have is not good enough. And the players are not performing, the coaches are not performing, the front office is not performing right now. And I don't know. The problem is that you could always say, well, yeah, but it could always get worse. And maybe they're waiting for it to get worse before they make a change. How could it get any worse right now? I mean,
not much worse.
I saw this stat the other night that was just mind blowing to me. I don't know if you saw this. Not only do the Royals pitching staff, which is abysmal, not only does that pitching staff have the worst ERA in baseball, they have the third worst ERA in the history of baseball. In the history of pitching staffs, since ERA was started to be recorded in the late 1800s, the third worst ERA by a staff in history. Now, I'm sorry, but to me, that probably means Cal Eldridge should not have a job. But it sounds like his job is safe according to insiders that know what's going on in the front office. It sounds like Mike Matheny's job is safe. I wasn't a Mike Matheny fan when they hired him. I'm for sure not a Mike Matheny fan now. Dayton Moore is probably worn out his welcome in Kansas City. At this point, you can't believe the narrative that, oh, the Royals are just a year away or they're just 2 years away. They're in a rebuild. They've got all this young talent. They're just biding their time. They're not. They stink. They're awful. It's time to completely clear house. It's time for wholesale changes. You got to get some new people in there.
Here's a couple other pretty damning and pretty incredible statistics if you are a Royals masochist. If you're not, then just click over and listen to something else for about the next 5 minutes. It's the worst 50-game start in 16 years for Kansas City. Josh Vernier actually pointed this out on his Twitter account. He's on sports radio up there at 610 in Kansas City. The 2016 won Game 50. They were 13-37. Dayton Moore was hired the very next day. That's the amount of time since the Royals were this bad. Royals Farm on Twitter provides us with this little stat nugget. The Royals pitching staff is on pace to be one of the worst in MLB history. ERA minus compares ERAs to the league average ERA in their respective seasons. 100 is average. 99 is 1% better than average. KC's team ERA minus is 134. It's the worst for any team in any season since 1954. And by fielding independent pitching, which is a statistic that focuses solely on the events a pitcher has the most control over: strikeouts, unintentional walks, hit by pitches, and home runs. It entirely removes the results of balls hit into the field of play because there are fielders. Things take funny bounces. They cannot control things once the ball is in play. By FIP minus, I think that's what they call it, fielding independent pitching, the Royals are 3,013th out of 3,015 teams in baseball history. By ERA minus, they are 2,634th among 2,640 teams since 1900. And Sam McDowell comes in a few days later, 12 hours. He released this today, coming in Macho Man Randy Savage style up the top rope with the elbow drop. The Royals don't get better when they arrive. And this is in his column. I think it's called, Royals pitching is historically bad. Here's what's even more concerning about it. You can read it on kansascity.com. 7 Royals pitchers have been called up from Omaha this year. Their first outing after the call-up, they're amazing. They've given up 1 earned run in 19 2/3 inning, which is a 0.46 ERA. So you think, farm system, we're just not pitching the right guys. Well, in their second outing, they have a 3.44 ERA, which you say, okay, they've given up 7 earned runs in 18 1/3 innings. That's not that bad. We can live with that. Well, in their third outing and beyond, Tommy, in 52 innings, those same pitchers have given up 33 earned runs for an ERA of 5.71. So these guys are good for about 2 starts, and then they get solved, and they don't get better. And they just get lit up and sent out of the yard. So this Royals pitching staff is a disaster. There's no reason to talk about the offense. The team is irredeemable. It's unwatchable. There's no, I know we have to have something to talk about when we come back and do the show next month, but with the Royals, I mean, there's nothing to discuss. They suck. They're terrible.
There's nothing to discuss unless John Sherman gets a fire lit under his ass and decides to actually that this is unacceptable. What's the chance
that's going to happen?
I don't. Like I said before, his story is yet to be written as an owner. He's only been an owner for like a year, and so as of now, he's standing pat and not making changes. I mean, I don't even really want to say you fire the hitting coach and that shows that you're making changes. I don't really think that's the thing. But really, I mean, you pointed it out in that stat that the day after the Royals, after that game 50 in 2006, they hired Dayton Moore, and 16 years later, they're back in that same position. It's
not great, Bob.
Probably should be the end of the Dayton Moore era. I hate to say it. Like I said, he brought world championship to Kansas City.
3 best years in Royals baseball history, maybe
1,000%.
I mean, back to back.
Yep, 1,000%. But you know what?
What have you done for me lately?
It's time to go. I mean, it's a business. It's a fickle game, and if I'm John Sherman, especially if you want fans to support your new downtown ballpark idea that you want to do at some point, which I'm not fully opposed to.
Biggest eye roll ever from me.
I'm not fully opposed to it, but if that's your big mountain that you want to climb, you need to have a team that performs that fans will want to come out and watch if you're going to do that sort of thing. So you can't be complacent for too long if you're John Sherman and that's your ultimate goal. So, I agree with you. There's really nothing more to talk about with this team. There's no reason to break down any of the performances, any of the players. It's just a matter of, are they going to just let it roll out for the rest of the season, or can they start to make some changes now?
The Wichita Wind Surge, on the other hand, they are currently in first place in the Texas League, leading the Texas League North by a 1.5 games over Tulsa. 31-20 are the Surge. They have the best record in the entire league. The best team in the South is San Antonio with a 27-24 record. And the Wind Surge have the best run differential in the entire league at plus 34. Spencer Steer absolutely tearing the cover off the ball. Simeon Woods Richardson had been one of the best pitchers early on. He has kind of fallen off a little bit from that early pace. But you look at what he has done. He's bounced back pretty nicely. He's got a 3.0 ERA through 10 appearances. He's 2-2. Louis Varland has made 9 starts. He's got a 3.61 ERA. This is a pretty good pitching staff at the top for Wichita. Their bullpen has been a little bit inconsistent, but they have shown signs that at times they can really lock teams down. They have also blown 7-run leads this year, but at times they have been really, really good. And so the quality of baseball at the downtown arena here in Wichita has been pretty good. Wichita Wind Surge baseball backing up their AA Central championship last year in prime position to win a Texas League championship this season.
Yeah, obviously in a game like baseball, you need more than just one star. You need several guys who can contribute night in and night out. So I'm not suggesting that this is just the Spencer Steer show, but he definitely has led the charge and has been the marquee guy for this organization. Definitely. He's somebody that when you watch him play, how dynamic he is. I saw this towards the end of last year when he came on board with the Surge. You just know when he gets up to bat that he's seeing the ball really well. And he's somebody that the way that he works counts, the way that he hits all directions, all fields. He can go opposite field if he needs to. He hits like a professional. He hits like somebody that you could see in the big leagues. And I felt the same way about Jose Miranda a year ago for the Surge as I do about Spencer Steer now. And Jose Miranda, has gotten some action with the Twins, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Spencer Steer be the next one to be called up to St. Paul. Of course, that's the nature of the beast when it comes to minor league baseball, in Wichita. But it's great to see the success that the Surge is having, and that they were able to back up what they did last year with a strong performance this year. And, it would be very easy for there to be a sophomore slump for this team. The inaugural year last year, a lot of excitement surrounding the team and the new stadium and all of that. And there could have easily been a drop-off. There hasn't been. And so hats off to Ramon Barrega and to his coaching staff and to the team. They've played great baseball so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing what more they can do.
I think Spencer Steer actually has been called up to St. Paul. He has actually spent
He's gone a couple different times. Yeah.
So he's been bouncing up and down. And so far this year, Spencer Steer, when he's in Wichita, has hit 307. He goes up to AAA. He's hitting 286 for them. So there's not a real big, dip down in his production. He's actually slugging the ball better at the AAA level. He's slugging about almost 100 points higher. His OPS is about 100 points higher at the AAA level. So unfortunately, we may not be seeing a whole bunch more of him down here in Wichita, which is a real shame because he's a fan favorite and certainly one of Wichita's best players. But they've definitely the Twins have got some good ones coming up through their system. Not good luck if you're a Royals fan, but at this point, the team stinks so bad, it doesn't really matter what happens here in Wichita because they're going to beat the tar out of the Royals anyway. So you might as well just enjoy the fact that the Wind Surge are enjoying success because, let's be honest, this is the only baseball team that's going to give you anything positive to cheer about for about the next 5 months. Sorry, Royals fans, if you don't like that, get a team that actually matters, and then we'll talk about them. A team that does matter next year, maybe even more than we thought. As we go to our last topic, the defending national champion, Kansas Jayhawks. Boy, was there a lot of movement in the last couple of weeks since our show. Here is what we now know. We broke it on the last show. Well, we didn't break it, but we told you on the last show, Christian Braun is gone. He is going to stand in the NBA draft. However, Jalen Wilson is back. Kevin McCullar Jr. is coming back to school. What a huge turnaround for this team. There was a time I did not think Wilson was coming back. I really didn't think Kevin McCullar. I thought that was all just pomp and circumstance and just basically PR, media manipulation, BS. There's no chance that Kevin McCullar's he's never suiting up in a KU uniform. Well, glad I didn't make that position public because I would have looked like a moron.
I wish you would have.
Kevin, yeah, too bad for you. You would have had something to hot take horn me about, but not so fast. Kevin McCullar is joining the team. Jalen Wilson is going to be back. All of a sudden, Tommy, that team that was trying to win back-to-back national championships, and I know that even discussing that in this age and era of the transfer portal is kind of ludicrous, all of a sudden it doesn't sound quite as ludicrous. Certainly it would be a unbelievable feat to be able to pull that off, and would certainly vaunt Coach Bill Self into not just one of the greatest coaches of all time, but maybe maybe one of the greatest coaching jobs ever, because this is not the wizard of, this is not John Wooden doing this at UCLA when he's got basically 9 of the 10 best players in the country. And it's no, wonder he wins 10 championships in a row. This is doing it where the parity has never been better. There's never been more money, more resources put into college men's basketball than at any other time. It's more competitive now than it has ever been. This is looking like a damn good KU basketball team coming back. I know you are extremely excited about Jalen Wilson and Kevin McCullar. What are your thoughts now as we look ahead, a little early, but an early look ahead at the defending national champion Kansas Jayhawk men's basketball team?
Yeah, I mean, I am excited, obviously, that those two guys are playing for KU next year, but I'm not ready to crown them. I'm not either. I'm not suggesting they're a favorite. I think that, they, with the return of Wilson and the addition of McCullar Jr., I think that they're a preseason top 10 team. Sure. But, again, it's difficult. Got to
come together.
It's difficult to win one national championship. It's really damn near impossible to win 2 in a row.
Yeah.
But that being said, this absolutely raises their ceiling by having those two guys come back. I was kind of the opposite of you. I was more convinced that Kevin McCullar would play for Kansas than I was Jalen Wilson coming back. I just thought, he announced that I felt like if he was going to stay in the NBA draft, that he wouldn't have committed to Kansas. Like, he transferred out from Texas Tech. Why would you tell Kansas fans?
Why go through all that?
Sure. If you're ultimately going to stay in the draft, just stay in the draft and don't announce the school you're going to. So I was pretty sure he was going to end up in Lawrence. But Jalen Wilson, down to the wire, it sounded like even all the insiders weren't even sure. It didn't even sound like he was sure until the day of, right before the deadline, that he was going to withdraw from the draft and go back to college. Good for him to go through that process. And he probably got outstanding feedback and was probably a guy that, teams said, look, like, you may not be drafted where you want or maybe even at all, but we wouldn't mind signing you, after the draft or whatever those conversations looked like. And I'm sure in his mind, he thought, let me see if I can go back to college and, get my skill set up a little bit more. And I'm excited to see him back in Lawrence. I think he'll be able to take on a little bit more of a leadership role.
Definitely.
He's kind of a jack of all trades a little bit. And we've seen that over the last couple of years with Jalen Wilson. But as his confidence grows, he has the ability to take over basketball games. And I think he'll be able to do that at an even greater level next season as kind of the unquestioned leader of this team. And I've always liked the way that Jalen Wilson plays. And so it does raise the ceiling significantly for the Jayhawks. I'm really happy with the way that this team has kind of come together with its roster, with the newcomers, the transfers, all of that. I think it's going to be great.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the recruiting class and the returners. Certainly the headliners for me are DeJuan Harris Jr., KJ Adams. I think that there are going to be some guys that played last year, like Zach Clements, that are going to get a chance to showcase themselves this year, but they're not certainly on the radar, I think, in as big of a way as DeJuan Harris. Certainly he's going to be the point guard, everyday point guard leading this team. And I think KJ Adams has a real chance to make maybe the biggest jump. When we saw his off-the-charts athleticism, the fact that he can really be a lockdown defender and be a spark off the bench, I think he's going to get a lot more opportunities this year. And certainly the recruiting class of Grady Dick, MJ Rice, Ernest Uday Jr., and Zubi Ejiofor. Grady Dick, certainly from our neck of the woods, being a Sunrise Christian guy and a Kansas kid, he is going to be at the top of everybody's list because of the name recognition that he has and the time that he spent down here in the Wichita area. But yeah, there are a lot of these guys that are going to play, and it's going to be really exciting to see, a starting lineup. I don't know who exactly the 5 are going to be, but you'd have to think that Dick, Harris, McCullar, Wilson, those 4 guys for sure are going to be the 4 of them. I think is that a lock? Is that too strong? I think those 4 guys are going to be very much in the mix. I don't know who the 5th will be necessarily, but for those 4 guys, I think are going to be very strong contenders to be in that rotation.
My biggest question with Grady Dick is going to be, how does his game transfer to the college level, and how raw is he as a freshman? I mean,
sure,
there have been plenty of times that we've seen really heralded freshmen coming in to Kansas, and they've got a ton of talent and they're super athletic, but they're a little raw, or they play a little sped up. They're, got to get their legs under them. They got to get used to everything that an elite college basketball program has at the college level. And it takes a little while for them to adjust. And some of them are able to, some of them not so much. It'll be interesting to see which category Grady Dick falls into. Now, he's supremely talented. Nobody can take that away from him. But I think the question will come up, how quickly and how well will he be able to adjust?
Also, one last little thought here. I know that people are always and already caught up on all these other guys. I just got a feeling that Cam Martin is going to bring a lot more to the table this year for KU than people think. Ryan Hawkins went up and was a major part of a Creighton team that made a pretty decent run in the NCAA tournament this year. He was playing Division II basketball in the MIAA at Northwest Missouri, winning like 3 national championships. Cam Martin was a national All-American at Missouri Southern, competing with Northwest Missouri his last couple of years for the MIAA championship. I just got a feeling that Cam Martin is going to show people a lot this year. I don't know that for sure, just a feeling that I have. Let's finally go to our last little piece of business here. It is time for me to click down here and hit the music as we go around our Wichita Whiparound. A couple of stories that maybe you missed around the Wichita Metro. Let's go to Thomas Castor. What do you have here for your Whiparound today?
Yeah, so we're not going to be doing a program next week, and so this is the time to bring it up. The Wichita Open makes its return to the Air Capital next week at Crestview Country Club. It's the annual stop on the Corn Ferry Tour, and always a lot of fun. And the Corn Ferry players regularly vote the Wichita Open as their favorite tour event the entire year on tour, and so it will be making its return to Wichita next week. One notable note, that's kind of redundant, one notable note about the Wichita Open: this will be the final Open for director Roy Turner of Wichita Wings fame, by the way, the old soccer
originally.
club. But he's been the tournament director for the Wichita Open for many years. He's retiring after this edition and will be replaced by Dusty Buell, who I've known Dusty for a long time. He is also a well-known soccer figure in Wichita. So the soccer pipeline to golf continues in Wichita. He'll be taking over as executive director for the Wichita Open next year, but that tournament will take place next weekend. I plan to be there at least for a couple of days. It's always a lot of fun.
Roy Turner is such a great guy in the Wichita community, done a lot for charity. Super nice guy to interview as well. I'm going to go to football. The Kansas City Chiefs are hosting a high school football event tomorrow. That would be today as you are watching this or listening to this at Friends University. It's an 11-on powered by Nike high school football event. 7-on-7 games, specific drills. They are bringing the Lombardi Trophy for photo opportunities. Greater Wichita Area Sports Commission. They've got an auction of some autographed items to help raise money for families who are impacted by the Andover tornado this year. It's a youth football clinic from noon to 5. The Chiefs training lab powered by GEHA is also going to be on site. Event begins at 9, free to attend, concludes at 5. So if you don't have anything going on, you might as well come down. Andover Central, Derby, Hutchinson, Lee Summit North, Mays, Pratt, Wichita East, and Wichita Northwest high schools. Their football teams are going to be there. And obviously, you look at 5A and 6A, Derby, Mays, Wichita Northwest. Those have been some of the most prominent. Andover Central as well. I think those have been some of the more prominent teams that have figured into a lot of these state playoffs. So there's going to be a lot of high echelon high school talent at this event coming up tomorrow.
It's going to be a lot of fun. The fact that they're utilizing the Friends University campus, and they've got,
big for Friends.
Oh yeah. And of course, the chief staff, top of the line, elite, premier, and they're getting a chance to work with, some pretty big name high school programs around the state. That should be a pretty impressive event. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Before we wrap things up, any additions, corrections, or retractions for you, Tommy?
I've got nothing. It was a pretty perfect show for me.
Yeah, probably not. I do have a couple of additions. On a melancholy note, Viral Switzer has died. Kansas State Football Hall of Famer. He is a Kansas State football Ring of Honor member, the first scholarship black football player in the history of Kansas State and in the Big Seven Conference. Second team All-American in 1951 at cornerback. Second team in 1952, first team running back All-American in 1953, played 2 seasons for the Packers before serving in the Air Force, a few years in the Canadian Football League, then worked for a decade at the Chicago Board of Education, then returned to Kansas State where he started several programs as part of a campus-wide student minority program, a very, very big part of Kansas State football history there. Sticking with Kansas State football, they are still reported as being in the mix for a couple of local big-time athletes who will probably be at that event coming up tomorrow. 4-star quarterback Avery Johnson of Mays. Kansas State is in the final 3 for him. Widely reported as being Kansas State, Washington, and Oregon. Dylan Edwards, a 3-star running back from Derby, also considering OU, Jackson State, and 7 other finalists. So Kansas State in the top 10 for him. Kansas State men's basketball, Jerome Tang, adding David Gasson from Virginia Tech, who played in all 36 games for a Hokie team that won the ACC tournament. And the Big 12 announcing a 2-year extension, keeping the men's and women's conference basketball tournaments in Kansas City through 2027. The men at the T-Mobile Center, the women at Municipal Auditorium. And Tommy, as far as I'm concerned, I think you echo this. The Big 12, Big 8, Big whatever tournament, as long as it's not Big 10, it belongs in Kansas City. Kansas City is its home. It should be its home. It should be its home for forever, even when these new schools come in. I think that they will be impressed by how Kansas City runs the tournament. It's always been a great event. It's always been associated with Kansas City first and foremost, and it should be a permanent fixture in Kansas City as far as I'm concerned.
100%. Not going to argue with you about that.
What we will also not argue about is that we are going to take the next episode off, so we will not have a show for you here in the next 2 weeks. Of course, we're doing every other week this year here in 2022. Our next scheduled show will come up episode 99, getting very close to the century mark, coming back to you after the the July 4th holiday. Boy, there's an error by me that I just saved. We're going on the 7th of July, just after Independence Day. That will be our next show. Hope that you will join us then. Once again, like, share, and subscribe to the show if you enjoy the content. We really appreciate it. KOGsports.com, videos on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, and we're at KOGpod on Twitter. We will see you. Have a happy Independence Day in the meantime, and a happy Father's Day coming up as well. Tommy, your Twitter handle for our beloved audio listeners.
You can follow me on Twitter at tweetsfromtommy.
And I am at BE Cripps, BECRIPPS. Good luck to you Royals fans. You're going to need it this next month. Probably not going to talk about you on July 7th. We'll find something to talk about. Maybe we'll be discussing a new Wichita State athletic director. We will find out. See you in a month on the Keeper of the Games.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Visit our website at KOGsports.com. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at KOGpod. That's KOGpod.